We are excited you're here. This is an opportunity that we have that we can share with each other. I'm going to tell a little story on Bob Gary sitting up here in the front row. His son Rob has worked with me for probably, I'm going to say since 97 or so. They're from Delaware. And you know, as farmers, compared to what we do in manufacturing, it's a world difference. We get one swing at the ball each year. And it doesn't take very long. I don't know if they want that many lights off or not. We'll let them work on that. It doesn't take very long, and we realize that as life goes by, we're going to get about 45 attempts at hitting the perfect growing season, the perfect crop. And I love Bob's enthusiasm. We were talking here in the back around the food table. He said, Greg, I'm 76 years old. I've had 42 hits at the ball, and I can't wait for next year. I'm so excited. And I said, amen. Because we are in some interesting times. And it's not by chance that you farm or that you sell agriculture equipment. The good Lord puts us all in the right spot each and every day. And you notice all the white shirts I have around me. Phenomenal team. In a matter of a year and a half, I am so humbled by the team we were able to assemble. And they work hard each and every day. But for you and I that raise our families by farming, there's no secret that this year is going to be a challenge. And I guess personally, I look at it as an opportunity. And you can see the 10-year history of the grain market. And it's at times like this when you and I engage and we start to adjust our system so that we change the way we farm. And so you and I can't do much about the 365 corn. But there's a mountain amount that we can do on how we raise a crop. And so as we look at inputs, no secret, is it? You look at what seed corn is 20% of our total inputs now. Nitrogen continues to go higher and higher. And so we have to adjust. So I'm going to challenge you tonight that we need to get back to farming. And what do I mean by that? That means where you and I go back in the field and we start to listen to our corn. You've heard me say it for years. We go in the field and we start to listen to our corn and we start to work smarter instead of harder. And there's challenges to it. And what I want you to take home from tonight is the two different sides of the screen here. For years, in a $7, $6.50 corn market, we would take this $600 of cropping input, and we would just put it out there, wouldn't we? We'd just lay it down all at one time. And that time's passed. And you and I are going to need to start to divvy out money in a very careful way so that we generate tremendous output for each $100 we put in. You and I can't change the price of nitrogen or seed corn. We can complain about it, and we can manage around it in some way. But the day is over when we roll it out all at one time. And we're going to have to start to spoon feed our inputs to drive. The challenge tonight is, I'm going to challenge you to manage your inputs and raise your yields. It's as simple as that. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is a 450-acre field I've farmed for 20 years. It's an interesting family. They're not connected to agriculture in any way, and they want a lot of income. They've never checked the paper to see what the cash grain price is. All they know is they need more. So I obviously have choices. I can tell them after 20 years that I want to walk away, but I've got a lot of livelihood invested in here too. There's a lot of buildup of fertility in here. And so Aaron and I approach this totally radically different. We say, what if we start to manage how we think about this particular farm? So I took the liberty to throw up here. So if you look at some of where our genetics cost is after discounts this year, it's not unheard of to be $145 an acre for seeding. We're in 20-inch rows. We plant 38,000. This farm here was planted 38,000, and our cost was $74 an acre in seeding. What did we do? We went out and we said, if we're going to go back to farming, why wouldn't we put in conventional corn as long as we understood the risk and the cost? And so as you look here at these different numbers that we have, I don't know if this one's going to work. Try this one. And you can see here, this is a Pioneer number. This is nothing more than 6297, only it's the 95. This is 6208, only the 05. And so we started to get in our fields weekly. And what are we looking for? Well, we understand you don't have rootworm control. You're not going to have corn borer control. There's going to be lots of challenges that you're going to have to manage. But at the end of the day, the whole farm went 254. So all of a sudden I start to say, wait a minute. Maybe if we go back to farming, instead of paying it all out front, I have nothing wrong with traits and GMO, believe me. We plant a lot of traded corn. But at the same time, we got ourselves in a corner on one farm. Why wouldn't we go in and start to spoon feed those dollars out very carefully? I got what, $71 here to play with. And all of a sudden, I got myself in a position, if this family is going to drive a lot of demand and a high price. So when the planter runs, you're going to see here that we're going to have liquid insecticide. We're going to put a starter on the seed, so we got everything banded. So we're going to have liquid force here running at 9 ounces to the acre. And so we're going to watch for rootworm. We're going to be on bean ground, so we feel like we can get by. And you can see the results from previous years. And you can see that we're able to manage that. At the same time, we're going to be in the field. We're going to be watching every detail. This corn's talking to us, isn't it? And you've heard me say it many times. The leaf below the ear leaf is where you start to get really nervous. Watch it close, gentlemen and gals. You need to be in there looking for gray leaf at that stage. And if you see enough lesions, you put all the lesions you see below the ear leaf on a quarter and it covered it, you need to start spraying. And you need to go ahead and manage it. You can see here we're walking in and we're looking for insect feeding on silks. And we're in the field listening to the corn saying, what are the next steps we're going to take? Because we got some extra money here to work with, but at the same time, we need to drive yields. And so those of you who have been walking around here in the room, you see a product called Undercover, and you see all of a sudden we have the capability to start to manage plant health. A lot of the plots that we worked on this year, if we manage plant health, everything else starts to work better in tandem. And so as you go out in the field and you say, what are the challenges that we have out there? And you can see what this little undercover looks like. There's actually a spot for 4 nozzles, but you can see here that we're running 3. In our seed corn production, we run 4. I run 1 on the boom pointing down and 3 underneath. And we're in the field immediately as they cut female corn. So if we're cutting leaves and they're in there cutting female corn, we're in there immediately with undercover spraying headline amp and taking care of it and trying to make sure that we got everything in a great spot. How about, though, what's been the practices in the past? And we talk about saying we're only going to lay down a certain amount of money at a time. We're going to spoon feed it out and manage the best we can. And we talk about fungicide applications. And we talk about airplanes. And I have nothing against the air guys. Bless their hearts. They've saved a lot of us this year in extremely wet conditions. And so when you see a plane running across this crop, this is probably XR. We're here at about V7. And you can see a plane coming across here, and he's probably running about 110 mile an hour, and he's putting out a gallon to the acre. And you say, well, what kind of coverage would we expect to see from that compared to, say, if we had undercover come from underneath? So it's always about you and I positioning ourselves to get the best response possible. So the photo here on your left, you can see this is on the top of the leaf, stapled, litmus paper, and you can see what undercover did here. And then you can see what the plane did here on top of the leaf. You can see underneath here we have litmus paper stapled on the bottom side. And then you start to look at the bottom side, and all of a sudden it started, as a manager of your field, you start to say, wait a minute, this could be a tremendous opportunity. So when I was talking to Bob Gary, what was he talking about? Why is he so excited? He took undercover in his fields, and he put on some special nutrients on the leaf. And he said, Greg, in Delaware, I saw over 350 bushel corn. Now you know why he's excited to grab the bat for next year. And then he followed about 3 things. He said, and I'm going to try this, this, and this next year. And you look at what the standard has been underneath the leaf, and you can see there's no application. So it comes down to saying, well, where do we put our money? And if we're going to go out and treat, what kind of responses can we see? And you can see on the line here a dramatic difference. Treat it under cover. This is per axar in this plot at V10. And you can see here the gray leaf on this side. As you start to watch that, you can start to see there's quite a bit of differences. We have a great relationship with Winfield. And they took undercover and they went into all these different towns here, and you can see all the different towns across here. The interesting thing was they saw about 11 bushel advantage to fungicide application across all those different places. They saw about an 8 bushel advantage when they sprayed over the top. They saw over 11 bushel advantage when they used undercover. So something as simple as technology that says you could come in on your high boy sprayer and you could go underneath the leaf and you start to talk about 3.5 bushel response to that. Then you start to say, well, wait a minute, maybe there is opportunity in the kind of market that we're working in. Agri-Liquid did a lot of tests for us this year, third-party data. So they raised some pretty good corn here with no application of headline amp. They were in the 195. Where they sprayed over the top, they were in 210. So they picked up almost 15 bushel. And they were in the, 218 of undercover. 8.2 difference between over the top spraying and coming underneath. And so it comes down to what you and I view as just common sense. You know, over the years, as we invent, Tim and I and our team, we work on products. A lot of times you see that the ones that are most successful are just simple. And I tell you, if we could come through the field and we could put product under the leaf where all the spore openings are compared to on top of the leaf, something inside of your mind says, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. And so these are the type of things that we're researching and working on, and it's all about if I can add 8.2 bushel more with the same amount of product, but just change the application, all of a sudden I got myself in a position in a 350 corn market that it makes quite a difference. At the same time, in soybeans, we've had some very good success. You can see here, we're out in soybeans. You can see the undercover running. See a little dust coming here from the wheels, but you can see he's right down in here spraying at the same time. Likewise, with some very good results. So this is an insecticide and fungicide response to soybeans. I think this was sprayed about at the R2 stage in beans, and they saw about a 9 bushel response. That was up in northern Illinois. But I want to drive home the point why we're out in the field looking. So this is a BASF trial. And notice here, this is a headline amp. This is on corn. And so this bottom side here is where they treat it. They had a plot here where it was stressed, and this corn was showing yellowing. It had a nitrogen problem. In other words, they were running out of N, and that plant was talking to them. And look at the difference, 11.5 bushel difference where plants start to get stressed. So you and I as growers, as we move into 16, the challenge is going to be this. We're going to have to keep our corn in a perfect position so we can have success. If you and I are going to take corn and beans and we're going to stress them early, then we're going to run into some really hard situations. And these are the things that I worry about. How do we manage in a tight input year and still maintain yields? And so when you see this kind of response here to nitrogen, 11.5 bushel difference, you and I realize quickly, but we can't let this crop get behind. If we're going to go out and spray fungicide, then we're going to have to manage it. Our program will be this. We will spray fungicide on 100% of our acres. We're going to have our corn in a sweet spot where we have it managed correctly so we can capture the extra yield. When you're in narrow row corn and you realize some of the weather nature conditions that we've had, fungicide has had a tremendous response on our farms. Let's take a look at this picture. Look familiar? Saw it all over the nation, didn't we? Nitrogen. And there's all kinds of reasons for it. This could have been water damage. It could have been put on the fall before and maybe not quite managed correctly where nature took a hit on them. A lot of growers said, you know what, Greg, I got enough on, it should finish the race. And when you look at this field, you realize the challenges that we're under. So as we talk tonight, I would like to have you rethink about how you and I manage inputs. We can't change what the good Lord does to us. Nature has its way. You can see in this picture, I can't tell you, and lately, these are 3 and 4 inch rains. If you start to look back at the weather data and the way the weather events have been happening, we're getting a lot longer, harder, more amount rains each and every time they come through the Midwest, aren't we? And so we can have a field that's looking like this, that's ready to go, and you can see here what's about to happen in the next 15 minutes, and I can't tell you how much that is. So as a professional grower, as someone that's going to say, I'm going to increase yields, but manage my inputs very tightly, I'm not going to go out and put 100% of my in on at this stage at knee-high corn or V6 corn. I want the ability to go left or right fast. And if nature says, I'm going to put this rain in on us today, and the next day we're going to give you another 2 inches, and I'm going to finish off on 1.5 inches, how many of you had over a 6-inch rain event this year? Yeah, a lot of you. It's been a long time since we can remember that until this year. We had a 9-inch event. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a 6-inch event. And where we have the proving grounds, that was a beautiful lake, 300-acre lake. And I couldn't help but think what would have happened if that had been in August. And I'm moving the proving grounds out of the bottom, so I'm moving it up on some up ground. I figured if this is going to be a trend, we better watch. So this is part of farming. We have to be prepared for this. We can't control it, but we can manage around it. At the same time, you got to get pretty excited that these little guys, this is microbials, I call them Mike. And so we have, on one hand, we have the opportunity to lose what we applied. And on the other hand, we have a tremendous opportunity, the way nature's created, that we could actually get mineralization or a plus. If you're sitting in here from Iowa or from someplace in the middle of the Corn Belt and you have a 4% organic matter, you realize that you can get 100 pounds of free nitrogen. If everything goes right and Mike and his team are working, he's going to hand you $100 per acre free. And I'm going to be the first to raise my hand and say, count me in. And so as you start to go through this, you start to say, well, wait a minute. I can see you want yourself in a position, obviously, where you never run out, correct? We never want to see yellow corn. Yellow corn's a really bad day for you and I. There's a lot of things that are happening in that corn plant's life early. But at the same time, if I had put on all my nitrogen last fall, 210 pounds, and I didn't take advantage of this, I've spent money when I didn't need to. So let's take a look at what corn likes to do. And so this is Fred Below's corn nitrogen usage chart. And you can quickly see when corn gets head tall, V10, it starts to utilize nitrogen. 75% of the N in a corn plant's life is used after it's head tall. So the nature that we've been following, and you look at the numbers, it's almost amazing. Do you realize that 80% of the growers in the United States do not side dress corn? Only 20% of corn growers nationwide use side dress. So 80% of the guys, and you'll never convince me that you're smart enough. You'll never convince me you're smart enough on November 1st to say, you know what I think we need to finish the race in 16? 218 pounds of nitrogen. Really? Really? Yeah, Greg, that's 1.1, for my yield goal, and my yield goal is 185, and so if I do the math, that's what I need to put on, and it's November 1st, I'm going to put it on once and done, and I'm going to run with it. We're a long time from harvest, aren't we? 8 months. And you look at the weather events that's been trending here in the last 18 months, and I start to get really nervous. So 80% of us put it on in one shot, and only 20% of us are trying to spoon feed. This is what I mean. We get back to farming, and we need to start to think it through, because if it's not using it until all the way out here, what should be our program? Well, we should put a base rate on. We call it base plus. So if you went out last fall and you put on 110 pounds of anhydrous or 125 pounds of hydrous, thumbs up to you. In our program, we'll have about 80 pounds on to 110, depending upon if we're corn on corn. We'll have 110 on pre-plant. If we're corn on beans, we'll have 80 on. And that's going to be this section in here, what we call the base rate. And we know it's more than enough to get us to where we're first going to start to think about applying. So we're going to come in and start to think about this is when it's going to start to use nitrogen, and look at its usage as it goes through into the yield curve and into the later parts of its life. And so let's talk about this, and let's look at some of the things that happen. This is John's farm over in Bloomington. We're doing some testing. He's got 150 pounds of anhydrous put on November 10th. What was November like? Unseasonably wet and warm. And then we moved into December, and we broke all records. I remember what particular day it was. We were like 71 degrees, and on the farm show at noon, it said we broke a 100-year record for the warmest temperature ever. At the same time, we were getting extensive amounts of rain. So if you look at where he went out and knifed, and you can see we got a row here, a shank here, and we got a shank over here, and we went in and we pulled every 3 inches across there. We probed it down. And we took it to soil scan, we sent it into a lab, and we said, what has happened? Does John need to be nervous about what nature's done to him? And you can say, well, this has never happened before, Greg. Thankfully, he's only got 150 on. But if you go out and start to look, so the red is going to be your ammonium, your anhydrous, and the end is what Mike, unfortunately, came out of his sleeping period, and Mike converted the ammonium to nitrates. And if you look where the knife is here, John's got some interesting scenarios. Basically, 40 pounds of his 150 converted and is now exposed to nature. I'll just say it clear on that. John has 110 pounds on. 40's gone. And so this is something that you need to understand, and it's something that happens. You can say, well, Greg, that's never happened before. Hats off to him that he didn't have 250 on, because that would have been a loss of probably almost 100 pounds. And so this is reality, and you look across the nation, this is where it comes. So if we're going to say, well, we're going to start to manage and spoon feed corn, how do we know what to do? And you've heard me say it many times, you need to measure. We talk about it all the time. Start to put different applications of N on, and then measure to see how full the gas tank is. Some of you might have pulled in here to the parking lot at the yield center, and you might only have maybe 1/8 of a tank of diesel fuel left in the pickup. Well, it'll be the first thing you do in the morning. You're going to leave the motel, you're going to hit the gas station, you're going to fuel up, and then you head home tomorrow, you're going to know that you're going to make it. And that's no different than what we do here with this technology. You see them scattered all around. The guys were tickled to show you what it is. So soil scan is nothing more than a gas gauge in your given field, and it's instant. Soil scan measures what the plant sees at this moment. Different sometimes than what we send to the lab. We learned a lot last year. It's interesting. So if you pull your samples in the morning and you put them on the pickup seat, and at noon you take them in and then put them in the refrigerator and they were on the pickup seat for 3 hours, I will guarantee you Mike and his team change the value of that N. They start to mineralize, and that thing started to crank, and all of a sudden you no longer have the same numbers. But you put 2 tablespoons of soil in here, and I'm going to tell you exactly where we need to go for this week. And so you go out in the field and you pull a couple 12-inch probes. We got technology, a little QR code here. You can scan that in, put that bag right up by your iPad. It will tell you exactly. Yield Patrol is a new software that's with Soil Scan. It'll tell you exactly where you pulled the sample. And we can start to record it, and you'll have it in your cloud account, and you can start to follow the results as we go through. Ron and Tim worked hard last year, our agronomy team, and they created a nitrogen calculator. It's different than the modeling that you hear and see, but it gives you a tremendous idea of where you need to be. So in this case, they pulled a 12-inch core. It had 4 parts per million of N. Where's gas gauge? About out. She's running on fumes, that field. Corn still looked green. True. Very true. It would. But it's soon going to do what? Start to change and start to turn. So he's at V12 stage. He's got 2.8% organic matter. He's running 4 parts per million. Nitrogen calculator, soil scan. Well, obviously you'd want to talk to your agronomist. It's saying you need to put on about 110 pounds of nitrogen to do what? To finish a race. V12 corn's above my head. It's probably just about ready to start tasseling in the next week. But another 110 pounds is going to take you into a very successful harvest. And so those are things that you do and you see, and this is how it looks. And you can see him coming through here. This happens to be Mark Shorts, who works with us. He's a tremendous young farmer to the east of us. We work together in our tiling business. What's the first thing you notice about Mark's field? Did he get it right? Yeah. That corn looks phenomenal, doesn't it? But he's in there putting another 100 pounds on to finish the race. But the first thing you do is you judge Mark and you say, I believe he's on his game of soil scan because he didn't run this one out. He didn't run this one out. And the beautiful thing is when you start to think about corn at these stages, at this stage, what's Mark concerned about? He's concerned about length of ear, isn't he? You start to run it out and that's painful. All of you know what a kernel's worth in length, 6 bushel. Every kernel long is worth 6 bushel to you. If Mark would have run this field out and turned that field yellow, and he lost 5 kernels in length, he lost 30 bushel. Probably wouldn't have known it unless he's out listening to his corn. What would have happened, though, if this field had been knee-high and she'd have turned yellow? And you're going to see that. You saw it last year. That's a whole different deal. What's happening knee-high? We're talking how many rows around. Remember, these guys are worth 10 bushel to you. So if you tell me your corn started out at 16, you stressed it and it went yellow, and it pulled back to 14, 20 bushel. We call it a hidden loss. You don't know unless you look. So the first thing I would do if I walked in your field, I would look at your corn to see how uniform it is, how equal it is. I'm talking about all the ears on the same node. Where should they be? 7th from the top. Count them. You grab hold of the leaf on top and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I like you a lot. You got that corn's talking to you. If it's on the 8th node, what's that mean? Nature probably beat you up a little bit. Or you mismanaged your nutrient program. So if you stress corn early, it'll set a node lower. Corn can put an ear on any node. You want them on the 7th node from the top. That's when you're running, and you want them all there. And then you take the husk and you jerk them down and look, and then corn rows better line up all the way from top to bottom. They better be in a perfect line. If they are, hats off to you. You're an A+. If you tell me right here, they went from 16 and the rest of these are 14, and they scrambled here a little bit, that means we have an opportunity next year to change it. And we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to say, what can we do different? That's why corn production is so humbling. If you want to even increase the fun, take your wife along. And tell her these things, and as you're working through, she can start to ask you some questions. She's going to say, well, 20 bushel, and let's use $4 because you do math in front of a crowd, you want to make it easy. That's $80 an acre, and we're farming 1,000 acres. That's $80,000. And you said we can't put a new kitchen cabinets in, and all of a sudden, you have a great discussion in the middle of the cornfield. And it's good for your marriage. It's good for you. And so those are things that happen. And we can talk about it, but at the same time, hats off to this young grower. As I see him coming through here, you can see in a hurry, he's gotten the sweet spot. What's going on down underneath? Well, it's all about timing. We've talked about timing, and it's all about positioning and placement. And so as you watch it come through here, we got her slowed down so you can take a good look at it. You can see right here, where are we putting it? Right along the stem, aren't we? Right where that plant, the way it was created, it's got a massive root system right there along the stem, And so we're adding nutrient potential right here. Ken Ferry's a pretty good friend of mine. He does all my consulting. We have a good time together in the field. And I said, Ken, what's the number one thing you learned this year? And he said, the number one thing I learned this year, I would have never believed, Greg, you could have convinced me that we can take yellow corn and flash it green in 48 hours. And I saw it. We did a lot of custom work, and we did a lot in our own fields. And where we took and put our plots in with the airplane of urea, and we sprayed twice urea over the top, so we didn't put it all on at one shot. It took 14 days. 14 days of yellow corn compared to 48 hours of yellow corn. And so we start to talk about how a plant talks to us, and you can see positioning becomes crucial. And you say, well, Greg, what if I didn't live where I got 2 years of rain in 2 months? It happened. Tremendous rainfall here in the Tazewell County area. Look how his corn's created. This is 3/100 of an inch of rain. It spotted the windshield and the pickup hood. Jumped out. Actually, Ron took this picture, and he took it, and you can see what we call stem water. If you had nitrogen right here, would that corn plant be able to utilize that? Yes. Look here. Heavy fog. This corn was not quite up to my pocket of my jeans. I drove into Encore, couldn't hardly see that morning. It's really heavy fog. Parked the truck, grabbed a camera, jumped across, walked in the neighbor's field across the road and took a picture of it. And look at the moisture that migrated down this stalk, the way it's designed, and created the perfect environment for you and I to put nitrogen for placement. At the same time, this is a study out in Iowa by Soybean Board, and they went and looked at where we put colders down the center of the row. So on 0 inch is one row, on 30 inches the other row. They run a colder system, spring nitrogen, anhydrous at 150 pounds. 5 weeks later, they come out and they started to probe across. And they said, in 5 weeks, what has happened? Where's our N gone? And you look at it, and you say, oh my. 42 parts per million of nitrates here, 31 here. It's all exactly in the center of the row. How much of it has moved to where the root systems are out here? Very little. And so our challenge has been, what about all the side dress bars that are out there? And you can see us sitting here. I just took a picture of this one. So 360 Yield Center is introducing Y-drop for colder bars, because you run your bar the height that you see it here, out here to the side. You'd be surprised how tall a corn you can run in with your existing tractor. Ask Jim Hedges. At the proving grounds, by the time Jim's sessions were at the end of the week, we had corn shoulder high. We were driving a tractor side dress bar through, and you guys were running down the road behind it, and we were seeing some pretty amazing things. And so I'm excited about this technology where no longer do we have a colder running in the center. Now we're out here positioning it right to the edges. You can see that we're going to have a breakaway system on it, so if you do hit some kind of a terrace or you're running down through a ditch and your wheels drop into a gully, you're not going to bend anything, they just break away. You'll see the same thing over here in the tall sprayers. It's a magnetic breakaway, so it's got the ability to get out of the way and immediately click back in, and you keep rolling. And that's the kind of things that you see. AgriLiquid, they went out and did a study, and these numbers are pretty extreme. And when I see them, I look at that and I say, wow, I would not expect you to see 16 bushel difference at V5 corn. How high is V high? Top of your work boot. So we're talking corn this tall. And they went out and put it on the center of the row, and then they went out and put it right next to the row, and they saw 16.4. I would expect you to see something more like this. So here they went in this study, and they dribbled it with a hose running down the center of the row. Then they put a colder, and they picked up, what, almost 3.1? And then they went in a Y-drop, all at the same stage, all at the same time, and they picked up about 2 3/4 bushel. That's something I would believe. The other's a little, I'm not going to tell you, you're going to see that kind of response unless there's something majorly going on in that field. But at the same time, I'm pretty excited about this. I'd much rather run, we've run a 36-row colder cart for years, and Jan can tell you about bearings and opening disc and problems in the back. And so this is something you have an opportunity to take a look at. It comes down to, once again, just where are we going to spend our money and how are we going to position it. So let's talk a little bit about Base Plus. You can see a grower here out doing his spring anhydrous. And so the challenge is going to be, how much are you going to put on? I like that, 110 to 120. If I was doing anhydrous, I think that kind of level amount is going to keep you in the hunt. That's what you're going to have on early. And then what are you going to do? You're going to sit and you're going to wait. And you're going to let nature and Mike do their work. And you're going to be positioned to say, where did I lay down my next $100? Do I wait and let nature take its course? Or if Mike's working hard and soil can telling you your gas tank's staying even as corn uses it. And corn can use a tremendous amount of nitrogen per day. It wouldn't be uncommon to see anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds a day in a crop that's at its maximum load. And so at this stage, we're going to talk Base Plus with the opportunity to come in later. So 360 is a nitrogen company. And we like all forms of nitrogen. We said we want to jump in and help growers wherever they are. And you can see here what anhydrous bars look like with some of the challenges. Just like for years we worked on planters and we shine a bright light on some of the planter problems, this is something that's pretty common. You can see here yellow corn. What would you expect to find in there? Well, no question, smaller ears. You probably got a lot more standability problems in these spots. Dry down is going to be a challenge. But you can see this spot compared to this spot is going to yield dramatically different. How much difference would there be there? I bet you there's 20 bushel. I got confident that this year if we walked enough yellow strips compared to green strips, we were seeing 45 bushel difference. Very common. Really stressed yellow corn compared to really green corn, you could get it to be 50 bushel difference in a hurry. And so the name of the game is for 360 team to come in and say, we need to fix this. And the way we fix it is through 360 Equal Flow. And you can see it sitting back here in the corner, a little 6-row machine for a demo machine. What's unique about this? We never let it turn to vapor. If we can keep your anhydrous in a liquid form and put it under high pressure, now we can pump it, and it starts to do what? It starts to become very manageable. We don't have some hoses with 30% vapor in them and some liquid, because you're going to see a tremendous knife-to-knife difference. And so this technology is going to take us to a new place. I've watched frozen knife for years. It's been years since I put on anhydrous, but I can remember this well. And our team said there's answers to that. And we took in, and you'll see it sitting over here, what we've designed what you call a warm knife. And so this is a mole knife foot. And you can see that we now have an orifice here. So if you're in an equal flow high pressure system, we can put your orifice plate at the knife. What does that do for you? No longer do you have to be just totally paranoid about hose length. So if your hoses were 6 inches difference on your system now, probably getting a difference out of the knife. And we check if the orifice difference between 6 inches and 276 inches out the bottom of the knife was absolutely no difference. Because of why? We're using liquid. And we're pushing liquid to it. And so if the orifice right here makes a tremendous difference. After it gets in here, there's a tube with a cavity around it, and that's what creates the warm knife. And so there's a rubber hose in here, and no longer will your knives freeze up. We had a couple 60-foot bars working on a large farm in Iowa, and he said, I wouldn't have believed the difference. In wet conditions and cold at the end of the fall here, he said these knives never froze up. And you can see this one, several of your knives in your machine, this would be a vapor line. So out of your manifold system, any additional vapor is coming off of equal flow, it's going to vaporize, and it's got a large enough cavity, the vapor comes down around the rubber warm hose and comes out the bottom. At the very bottom here, we got some interesting little technology. We've shaped this fin so the nitrogen splits on each side and doesn't splash back up and start to vapor out the top. And so this will be an option. We'll be in a beta this year. These are things that we say, these are when you start to shine a light on the anhydrous system that's been out there, you start to say, these are some of the simple things that can make life just a whole lot easier for you that's out there. Talk a little bit about our own program. So we're pretty used to coming in and putting on what we call a weed and feed. So in our case, I already told you, we want to be about that 80. So we're going to come in about 30 pounds of N. It'll be in a 28 or 32% form. And it'll be a weed and feed. So the floater will come in. We let our ground lay smooth so we can come right in and come across the top. We'll put that on and we'll work it in and we'll get ready to plant. When it comes to the planter, we like putting on different amounts of N. And so for years, we've been adding different amounts of nitrogen. Yes, we have starter on the planter. We put the starter through the Keaton. And so when I showed you we have liquid insecticide, so in this case, we're using about 3.7 gallon of starter. And we'll put our Furidan right here at the Raven pump. It mixes it, comes right out on the seed. At the same time, I don't know how well your screen is going to pick this up, we run these little Gen 2 operations where we have the ability to come in, and we're going to put on another 40 pounds of nitrogen. So we said we're up to 30. We're going to put on about another 40. This could be as much as 40, depending upon what field we're in. If we're going on bean ground, going into corn. And so we're up to the 80 pounds. But we're going to come in, if the seed is here, we're going to put that nitrogen right here off to the side. A good 2 inches and below the seed. And we're going to put that nitrogen right here through this little Gen 2 set. It'll be in the back. I've talked to Ferry a lot. I've talked to a lot of growers a lot. They do make a poor man's starter, or nitrogen. They will come off the back closing wheels here, and right behind, they will put a splitter here, a Y, and they will Y it down, and they will split their nitrogen, 28 or 32%, and they'll just put, it won't be exactly 50% each way, but they put it on top, and then what do? They drag a chain. I've questioned Ferry on that numerous times and said, Ken, if you were putting your nitrogen on top behind the planter in the spring and dragging a chain, how nervous are you? He said, I'm not at all. We've done it for years. I believe we can get by that time frame in April, May. In this case, we're putting it under the ground. I like to know that we got ourselves an insurance program, and so we're using the planter as part of our nitrogen program. We're carrying the tanks here in between the track and the cab. That carries 1,000 gallon there. We're carrying 400 here. And all of a sudden, the planter becomes part of our system of laying down $100 at a time, making sure we're going to focus ourselves in to grab yield. And so those are some things in our program that we're working on. Next step then is we're going to come out and we're going to pull some soil tests. And you can see here a 12-inch core. We're going to have the soil scan either out in the gator at the edge of the road or right back in the shop. We'll come in here and we'll pull those cores across the row. So you'll see a board laying over here by the John Deere Gator. We'll lay that down. We'll pull 11 samples, throw it in the bag, mix it up, and we'll say, what's reality? There's one thing I learned this year, is I can't afford to guess anymore. For years I've guessed. For years Gregg said, I think I have, and then fill in the blank. That's one thing I learned is I really don't know. Because nature is constantly changing the equation. And where I used to think I had enough, I found out I was probably running her a little tight. And so, in this case, we'll be in here. Our first pass is going to be right about in that V8 to V10. So, we're going to come in with a planned 60 to 70 pounds. Okay? So that puts me at 150 pounds total to date. I know I need 240 to raise 230 bushel corn. And so now it's just a question mark. When is going to be our next pass? And we're going to let nature take its course, and we're just going to follow it as we go. So if this corn here is almost up to our shoulders, we're in here checking to make sure we're still okay. We're going to come in with wide drop and put in about another 60 to 70 pounds. And you can see out here, this would be just about V8 corn, not quite V10. And you can be in here doing it with a planned next pass. The next time I come in, what am I going to be doing? Fungicide. And I have split tanks. We took and split our tanks. So our Miller and our Hagee are going to have a split tank. So now we have 2 pumps, and we can do 2 products at once. I can put on, this year we were putting on 17 gallon with headline amp, an acre. And at the same time, we're putting on 30 more units of N at VT. If we need it, we got the ability to finish it. What I just showed you was my mind is the perfect nitrogen system to take home the most opportunity. You can say, man, Greg, how are you going to play ball in the yard at evenings if you're going to be out here making 2 passes in this corn? Well, I would love to play ball in the evening, but I can't change Chicago Trade going 350 corn. So if I'm going to maximize yield and push corn where it's never been pushed before, Bob Gary doesn't live too far from Dave Hula. 537 bushel? Bless him. Don't you love that guy? 537 bushel of the exact same corn you and I plant. This is Jim Hedges' field. This is probably going to make about 256. You're halfway there, Jim. You're doing good, buddy. That's why I like the National Corn Growers. You know, you can say, well, I don't believe in those contests. I don't know. Those guys, how do they do that? The reality is they're planting the same seed we are. Now, Dave's probably going to go in there and put nitrogen on 4 to 5 times through the growing season. What's he doing? He's tricking that plant in to saying, never are you going to lose a kernel in length. You're going to go ahead and add another one. Instead of being 38 long, I can assure you his corn's probably 46 to 44 long, because it never has a bad day. And so the challenge for you and I is the opportunity we have is that we start to flex and we start to look at it. 54,000 population, that's just right. Sounds a little heavy, but is he in 30-inch row? He is. There's some challenges there to go with that. Let's take a look at this year's results. So this represents lots of different states, 560 trials of nitrogen around the nation this year for 360. And we ended up, from dry states to wet states to third-party data, we ended up right at 13.8 bushel response to managing nitrogen to a later time. This is a field over in Grant County, Indiana, so we looked up, Tim and I went in to AccuWeather, and we looked up his rainfall. He ended up with 12.1 inches through the entire growing season from planting to harvest. Never had more than an inch. I think the most rain he had any one month is 3.1. Most of them are half inches. At the same time, he went in and he said what? For years, he's done 200 pounds of anhydrous at V3. So what's he doing? He comes in, works his ground, he plants. When corn gets about that tall, he comes in and goes down the center with his mole knife, and he adds 200 pounds of nitrogen. And you can see here the line, whereas 360, we helped him, and we split this field in half. And so over on the 360 program, we said, let's do a base rate of 125 of anhydrous at V3, and then let's position ourselves to see what's going to take place. He came back in at a later date at V10, head high corn. It showed he only needed 60 pounds, so he saved himself $7 to $8 an acre, 50 cents a pound of nitrogen. He did 15 pounds less, and he increased his yield by 46.7. What's it really saying? Did he have enough at 200 at V3? No. That corn went under stress. To get 46 bushel difference, you had to have some corn, and you can see it here. This is just an NDVI reading, so you can see here the kind of showing of stress that this field has over here, and this corn just asking for more in. And so they're not all that high, but at the same time, I'll bet you his sweetheart is pretty excited. He added $170 an acre on a system of a change into his program. This here is Donnie Beloit up at Cheban's, Illinois, northern Illinois. Come in, his colder system so he came in at V4. His normal program is to put a colder. So he's got 200 pounds of N on here. You can see the line where he come in and did Y drop. And he added 31 bushel. Then he got crazy and said, you know what? What if I come in here and put a colder and Y drop both on top of each other? Now he's got 280 pounds of N. That just made the people at the 4Rs just drop over in the seat. And you realize he's way over nitrifying, but he added what? Another 19 bushel. So he has ground here that's begging for more nutrients. It's just a matter of how he's going to manage them. So it's pretty exciting data for Donnie. This is an interesting study out of Canada for our Canadian friends in Ontario. Pioneer did 9 different locations. They went in and they said, look, we're going to have a standard rate at these 9 locations. I'm not familiar what the rate is. I can just tell you it's not enough. What's that corn screaming at you? It's saying it's in trouble, isn't it? And you can see it. This is the guess row between the study where they came in at a later date. At V10, they put on 50 more pounds. And you look at this, you start to say, well, Greg, there's going to be a difference there. And where did it come from? Remember what we said. Look at the ear fill. Look at the tips. If you count it back here, you can see we've taken a lot of tips off. What's happening over here where they put the nitrogen on? She filled all the way out. This actual grain here was out the husk. And so this field is screaming for management, saying I'm not getting enough. So tip fill was big, and they put on 17, almost 18 bushel difference with $25 of nitrogen. So the challenge is for you and I is this. In the times that we live, I don't know who this father and son team is. We just pulled it off of Google. I like these guys. These guys like each other. Look at him laugh and look at Dad listening to him. What's he doing? He's come out of college. He's looking for opportunity. If he's married, I'll guarantee you, let's say his wife's name's Mary. Mary said to him this morning at breakfast, are you sure you did the right thing when you left college to come home and farm? Yeah, he did. Why is she asking? Because it's not always fun, is it, at these times that we live in? But this is a tremendous opportunity. The challenge is that we'd like to see, if he would just get a used sprayer and put a wide drop on it, start to go out and do custom work, can you imagine the opportunity he can bring in the dad's operation if they want to grow it? We had it happen all over the country. Young men, father and son's team that did not own a sprayer, they went out and bought a used sprayer. They sprayed their, I'm sorry, I went one ahead. They sprayed their 1,500 acres or 2,000 acres. He went out and did another 4,000 acres, and he paid for the sprayer plus put money back into the farm account. The reason I showed this is because I knew there was going to be a mountain of you young guys in this crowd. The most humbling thing to me is to look out over a crowd like we have here and see how many young growers we have, under 40 years of age. Hats off to you. You are our future, and you do a tremendous job of feeding the world. You know, that sounds kind of granular to say, our mission is to feed the world. Obviously, your mission is for you and your wife to provide for your family first, pay the bank, pay Mark at Sun Ag, get everybody paid. I understand that. But it's also a greater feeling, isn't it? I get asked that question all the time. Say, Greg, do you think we can actually feed 9 billion people? Yes. Yes. We absolutely can. Will it be perfect? No. But the opportunity is there. It's what we're talking about. It's where you take and you start to manage all these different things. When we say that 360 is a nitrogen company, it's all happening in this 360 circle. And it starts with how you run the combine and how you do tillage and then how you do plant health and how you do nitrogen. So let's talk a little bit about it. You look at this shot. This is fun, isn't it? Man, my heart's pumping here. I remember this field. That's Andy running the wagon here. Following him. Aaron's just a little bit slow. I'm about catching him. But we're having a ball of fun. And I mean, the yields are good. But we're already thinking, what, of next year? Realize what the potential is that's there. If I took a corn plant and held it up here, you realize it takes 5 years for Mother Nature to take that down. If in 5 years you utilize that whole stalk of value. And so as I'm out there harvesting, I'm thinking, what can I do to speed things up? Yeah, we design planters to go 10 miles an hour. What can we do to speed nature up and creating Mike to do more? And so what you see here is chain roll. And it's nothing more than taking that stalk and opening up all kinds of restaurants along there for Mike and his team. And it's about coming in here And you can see the high-speed video here. And look how we're taking it. About every inch to every inch and a quarter, we're opening that up. And we're cutting longer pieces so the planter next year has no problem. So you see a 7-inch piece falling off here. And you can see that we're chaining it. No longer are we creating confetti. But the real reason that I like this is what? If you look at the dollars that is in this residue, when you see this here, you should see dollar signs. Because what's in a 200 bushel crop? It's amazing. Look at the numbers. Think how many of you in here raised 250 bushel corn this year, or 230. Talking of a team from, he said he's 50 miles from the edge of the earth. That's pretty far north. I didn't ask him how cold it was, but it's, how cold was it, sir? 25 below? Yes, I figured. He said, Greg, we raised 230 bushel corn. My neighbors couldn't believe it. He said, I paid for my wide drop, my undercover in year 1. Best compliment I can get. My whole desire is design technology that takes you and your family to a different spot. But you look at this and all of a sudden you can start to see what? You see $100 here of value. And so never again should you look at this ever again the same. That's a $100 bill. Your task is to get that converted back into the system, so you have to lay down less money on the table to finish the race. We do realize that if you make too many fines, you're going to struggle on every plant counts. I've told you this for years. That's 7 bushel. Every ear you raise is worth 7 bushel to you in a thousandth of an acre. And so we want every guy to come out and hunt. At the same time, when you're running a combine, you see this, you always scratch your head. Because if we're in a 350 corn market, how can we get excited? This is under the head. The combine hasn't come across here yet. Combine just backed up. These guys got out of the corn head. I've watched this for years, and Tim and I were talking about it. I said, Tim, there's got to be a way that we can shut off this wide open deck plate opening in here so we capture a whole lot more corn. And so I'm going to show you what it looks like. And so you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen is conventional head running in Iowa. On the left side right here, this row is yield saver. And you can start to see the difference. And you can see the kernels are flying around in here. And so when we get out and we do the research, and you say, well, what difference does it make? Take a look. This is 25 feet a row. And we're counting 2 rows. 71 kernels over here on the OEM head. 5 over where yield saver. Did we catch them all? No. Probably won't. Some of those guys in high-speed camera, they come down, the ear hits the plastic snout. Kernel comes off and he goes airborne. I'm watching on the camera. Goes right over the edge of the head and lands out on the ground. And go, lost that one. But at the same time, in our research so far, it looks like we're about 1.5 bushel to 8 bushel savings. That's quite a range. I would just condense it to this. It looks to me like we should save you 3 to 4 bushel with yield saver. And so it's all about coming in. And so it'll be in beta this year, coming year. So you guys that are interested, we'll love to talk to you. We'll run it through engineering, but we're going to have a lot of fun with it. It's just common sense once again. So as we talk about things that are under the ground, so right here you see a massive root system. Isn't it amazing what a plant will put on? You already know the answer, so I won't ask you how many miles of roots a corn crop will put on in its lifetime. 3,000 miles actively growing at any one time. Think of that. From New York to California, at any one time, one corn plant puts on 3,000 miles. Now, that's a lot of micro little hair roots, and I don't know, the poor guy had to measure it, but I feel sorry for him. But as we look at this, I'm all about saying, if these guys are underneath there working, then I want to make sure I create the perfect environment. And so for years, we've done corn on corn. You can see this is an 870 ripper. They're well known in the industry. They're well known for what? If you have anybody, a gentleman just went by sitting in the crowd. I wonder if he recognized himself. So as you look at this, we're doing what? We're coming in here and we're mixing up that whole top profile. Why do we want to mix up that top profile? Well, if this is last year's root channels, corn's no different than us. It takes the lazy way out. You come in here and plant a new seedling. The new root is going to grow down last year's fossil track. And we were able through technology to say there's going to be a negative yield environment to that. So we come in and we mix it up. And we say, look, let's mix up the top 12 inches and let's confuse the new root that it can't find last year's easy path down to the profile. And so we're in there doing tillage for that reason. Everybody runs the 870 because they say, man, do we like the finish on top. And I'll be the first to raise my hand. That's absolutely the goal. You look at a ripper just ran, if you can lay a broomstick down or a wood piece and you don't see any divots underneath it, this field can have what happen? First thing in the spring, weed and feed floater can come across here. You don't have to touch this field with any tillage. You put on your chemical, you put on your nitrogen, you hit it one time and you plant. And you've saved yourself some inputs. But so many times, Tim and I would be out there and I'd be digging, I'd say, Tim, look at this. Why aren't we ever talking about all these humps, where these ripper points go? It's what I call the solid density soil between. Yes, you've done a massive job of tillage with your 530, 730, 875, whatever ripper you run, John Deere. You've done disc tillage on the top. You've mixed in some residue, but this here is what I've been watching for years. And, we've inline ripped bean ground, and we've always told you what? That you can lift that whole profile up and fracture it and reset it. So as we look at this and we say, well, this is a root system, and roots go out as far as the leaves go sideways. So if you go in your field in the summertime, you hold a leaf out, that's how far your roots go out sideways. And they go as deep as the corn is tall. So you got 10-foot high corn, you got roots 10 feet deep, unless you and I do something in here that sets in some solid density. And so we went after it. We said, look, if there are dollars of fertility in here, which there is, and roots are going to come down through this profile and turn on this mound and not utilize all this chunk of soil that has nitrogen and phosphorus and potash and sulfur, how much sense does that make to you? And so I started to challenge our team, and I said, look, I would love to figure out how to build a ripper point that takes out the mound and the hill. So if either you're on a 24-inch center, depends what your ripper is, underneath the ground, it creates this kind of scenario. And you start to see that this is very, very solid. I didn't draw it quite right. Better put our ripper shank over here. But you can see where the ripper, the V point went through here. It's blowing all this ground out. This here is still virgin. And when roots grow next year, they're going to come down and they're going to follow the least path of resistance. And so the challenge is to come out and say, what would it look like, designed from scratch, a ripper point that levels this playing field underground without creating any kind of compaction underneath it, and that you could still pull it? Because that's the mystery. And so we jumped in, and we hired some of the best there are. In fact, Tony and his team, they came from Case, and they used to lead over there, and now they're here, and we love these guys to death. This is what they should look like when you're done. So what is the goal when you're finished? Well, the goal when you're finished is if you're saying you're going to come in and you're going to rip 12 inches deep, and you have a shank here and a shank here, I don't want any more than about 1.5 inches in between where the deepest point of the ripper is. And so that was the task that you see right here, and you can pick that up. It has about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in between the 24-inch centers. And so we went out and we started to split rippers. This is a brand new 7-inch Tiger Point from Case CNH. And you can see the mounds in this half of the ripper, and then you can see the 360 system over here. As you start to work through this, we said, but can we pull it? And so we worked for months, and we changed a lot of dynamics of these wings, pitches, angles, and shaped a point. But we got to where, yes, I don't think we can pull it maybe quite the same, depending upon which test you look at here. So up in Michigan, so he had on He had a 235 horse front wheel drive tractor, 5-shank John Deere point. 5 shanks and the points were wore out. He was pulling these passes in 3 minutes and about 15 seconds. But they were totally smoked off. We come in, we put a brand new laser Deere point on, and it took him 4 minutes and 9 seconds to make a complete pass in the half mile. And over here we beat him with this brand new point compared to it by 2 seconds. I think that's the only time we won. In Northern Illinois, up by Matt Foes, again, a Deere Ripper. We were 5:17, one pass, 6.1 compared to 6.3. But at the same time, if you look at the kind of work we're doing, and then here on a lot of our farm studies, we were in that 4:17 to 4:15 on a half-mile pass, and you can see the kind of miles an hour difference compared to the case. And so at the end of the day, the challenge has always been, say, how can we go out and do a job which creates a massive root system, where roots just hammer straight down, and we utilize the whole soil profile that you and I have worked so hard to build, and not have to trade tractors to go higher. Now, there's some guys in here who sell tractors. They're probably saying, man, I hope Gregg's point pulls like crazy. We can trade a tractor quick. But at the same time, I'm really excited where we're at. And that point is for sale, and we're off and running. So at the end of the day, gentlemen, if you and I are going to survive and thrive and take this opportunity that we have, as some would look at it as a challenge, I look at it as an opportunity to get back to farming. We're going to be in the field. We're going to listen to our corn. We're going to take probes and see where the gas tank is. We're not going to take corn and yellow it out. If you and I are going to spend $145 an acre on genetics, why in the world would Gregg take and yellow it out and knock a couple rows around off? Makes no sense. So it's all about you and I laying down our money at the same time, at the same place, and we go slow versus all at once, and we say, let nature work with us, and I'm excited about what can happen for you. So we're honored that you came tonight. It's exciting to see all of you. Some of you I haven't seen for a couple of years. It's a real pleasure. I'd like to have you take your time, talk with all of our white shirts. We'll try to pick up some chairs and kind of get you out of the way. So drive safe to your motel, or if you're heading home yet tonight, by all means drive safe. I always get nervous. I'll never forget, years ago at Precision, I got there early in a winter conference. 6 o'clock in the morning I got there, a young man sleeping in his pickup truck. He woke up when I pulled in next to him, jumped out, and he introduced himself, said, I'm from New Jersey. My wife and I have been farming for 3 years. We got livestock. She's at home helping with that. I drove out to attend the winter conference. I said, man, you drove all the way from New Jersey? That's amazing. Watched him through the day. He was pretty tired, I could tell. He told me that night, he said, I've got to get home. I'm going to drive straight back. I said, no, you're not. I'll put you up in a motel. He said, no, I've got to get home to help my wife. I gave him 4 Mountain Dews, put him in the truck, and as far as I know, he got there safe. I've never heard otherwise. Now, I personally wouldn't drive to New Jersey for a farm meeting, but man, am I honored that you're here and you came. Bless you. Have a fantastic spring. Go get them. And if there's any way at all we can help you, if any question, you call anytime, because we're a company that's built up of farmers, agronomists, and engineers, and we design it to help you. Thank you for coming tonight.